A lot of new functions are coming to Excel this year. There are 14 in total, and these functions fall under two main categories: text and array manipulation. Today, I'm going to show you everything there is to know about these new text functions and why some of our old Excel habits are going to be a thing of the past. Let's start with the basics of text before and text after. If we want to dynamically extract all of the first names from our dataset, we can go ahead and type the text before function. The function takes two mandatory arguments. The first of these is the text that we're interested in, so let's select cell A1. The second argument is the delimiter, which will tell the function where in the text string to return our output value. In our example, this will be a blank space between the names, so we can put two quotation marks and then we can go ahead and close the bracket. Now we can evaluate and fill down this formula to get all of the first names. Text after is more or less the same. We can give the function the text value we're interested in and also the delimiter, and it will return all of the text values after the space for the names contained within our dataset. So text before and text after are relatively straightforward to use, especially when we compare these new functions to the combination of functions we've previously needed to use when dynamically solving a problem like this. We needed to use various combinations of the left, right, len and the find functions. Next, let's look at the delimiter instance. So what's going to happen in an example like this? In column A, we appear to have a name, salary, and a department, and there is more than one delimiter. In our example, we want to extract the salary which is contained in the middle of our text string. If we type the text before function and give the function the reference of A2 and then the hyphen delimiter, we can see that this just returns the first name. However, if we go back into our function, we can see that the first optional argument is called instant number. Here we can tell the function to return all the text before a dedicated delimiter. It doesn't have to be the first instance of the delimiter. So let's write 2 in the optional argument and then reevaluate. So now we're getting both the full name and the salary. We can extract the salary only portion by wrapping the text before function in the text after function. Our delimiter again in this case is going to be the hyphen sign. Now we can close the bracket and evaluate the formula. When we fill this down, we can get all of the salaries for our entire dataset. We had to use a combination of both the text before and text after functions here when we're interested in a middle portion of a text string. Again, this new method is much simpler than the old method where we had to use many combinations of the mid and find function. In our last example, we made use of the instance number optional argument. We can also do the same in an example like this. We've got a dataset that contains a list of full names. Some of the full names happen to have one full name and other names happen to have two first names. For our first name solution, we're going to need the function to return everything which occurs before the last delimiter, which in our case is the last occurrence of the space. So how do we do that? Well, if we write the text before function and give the function the text value along with the space as the delimiter, then in the instant number optional argument, we can define a negative integer or -1. With the value of -1, the function will return everything before the last occurrence of the delimiter rather than everything before the first occurrence, which happens to be quite useful for an example like this. Now we can close the bracket and evaluate. When we fill down the formula, we get all of the first names correctly, no matter if the first name contains one first name or two first names. We can follow the same approach for the second name. We want the text after function to return everything that occurs after the last occurrence of our delimiter. Let's set our delimiter as a space, and let's set our instant number as -1. Let's evaluate this formula and fill down. So great, the function has done its job correctly. Now let's look at multiple delimiters. This is an example that we've seen previously, except we can see that the delimiters across the dataset aren't consistent. Sometimes we have a hyphen sign, sometimes we have a /, and other times we have colons. Because we want to extract the department in this example, we can use the TEXTAFTER function, and then give the function the cell reference A2. Our first example is going to be a hyphen sign, and the instance number we're interested in is 2. If we fill down this formula, we get a lot of errors, as we expect, because the function cannot find the hyphen delimiter in the majority of cases. However, if we go back to our first formula and put a curly brackets around the delimiter, we can now enter more than one delimiter, and these should be separated with a comma sign. So let's include the / within quotation marks, and then let's also include the colon within quotation marks. When we evaluate the formula and fill down to the remainder of the results, we get the desired outcome. The TEXTBEFORE and TEXTAFTER functions also have an optional argument, which lets us take care of error handling. You can see for this task, again we want to extract the department, and we have the same formula that we used in the previous example. However, the department is missing for some of the entries within the dataset, and the function is returning #NA. If we enter into the function, we can see that the last optional argument is called if not found, and we can specify a value that the function should return rather than an error. So let's write not available for the optional argument and then evaluate the function. When we fill down, we are no longer having errors in the result. The TEXTSPLIT function is a lot like the text to columns command, but a lot more powerful. If we write the function name, you can again see that the function requires 2 arguments, the text that you want to split and the delimiter. Let's give the function the cell reference A2 and a hyphen sign as the delimiter. When we close the bracket and evaluate, you will notice that the function splits the text string and spills the results across 3 columns. If we fill this formula down, we can see that it works for the majority of the results, except where we have a colon sign. But just like TEXTBEFORE and TEXTAFTER, the TEXTSPLIT function can take multiple delimiters also. Let's just wrap the first delimiter in curly brackets. Now we can include another delimiter by using a comma sign and then within brackets the colon sign. Now we can fill this down and get the desired result. You will also notice that there are blank spaces after the second delimiter, which causes our output to also have blank spaces for the department entries. If we want to remove these blank spaces, we can simply wrap the TEXTSPLIT function within a trim function. So now if we evaluate and then fill down, you will notice that all of the blank spaces within the department column have been removed. We're not just limited to splitting text into columns. If we type the TEXTSPLIT function, you will notice that the first optional argument is the row delimiter. Cell A1 in this case contains multiple names which are separated using a comma sign. If we give the function the cell reference of A1 and then skip the column delimiter argument, we can include the comma sign in the row delimiter argument. Now when we evaluate the function, we get all of the results spilled in one single column across multiple rows. Because the data in cell A1 contains an inconsistent amount of comma signs between the names, we get these blank results in the function output. By default, the TEXTSPLIT function considers empty values, but we can override this by using one of the function's optional arguments called ignore empty. If we set this optional argument to true and then evaluate the function, now the function only returns the names and ignores the blanks. The TEXTSPLIT function is also capable of returning two-dimensional arrays rather than just a single row or a single column of results. The text value that we have within cell A1 contains names, salary information, and departments which are split with a hyphen sign. The next corresponding name, salary, and department is then split using a star symbol. So if we type the TEXTSPLIT function and give the function the cell address of A1, we can tell the function that the column delimiter in this case is the hyphen sign and the row delimiter will be the star sign. Now when we evaluate the function, we get an array of both rows and columns which correctly splits the names, salaries, and departments. Just like TEXTBEFORE and TEXTAFTER, TEXTSPLIT also has inbuilt capabilities for error handling. This example is the same as the example we have previously seen. However, you will notice that the department is missing in some instances within the data, and the function returns a hash error. If we enter into the function, you will see that the last optional argument is called padWidth. Within this optional argument, we can define our if error value. So in this case, I'm just going to say not available. When I evaluate the function, you can see all of the results which previously contained an error now shows as not available. If we wanted to sort the results of the TEXTSPLIT function based on department, we could simply wrap the function in a sort function. Because we want to sort based on department, we can define the sort index as 3. For the sort order optional argument, if we want to sort from A to Z, we can set the optional argument as 1. And if we want to sort from Z to A, we can set the optional argument as -1. So let's do that for this example. And great, we have the results of our dataset, and we understand what information is available and what information is not available.
So what do you think about these new functions? Are you excited to start using them? Are they going to replace some of the ways that you are currently using Excel? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.